Good morning, everyone. I've had a couple people reach out to me after I post some of my pictures of the ocean, saying they'd like a couple little video tours. They kind of want to check out where I'm going and whatnot, and so I figured I'd give it a shot. This little spot, I named it the Amphitheater. It doesn't have a name on the map, but it's a cool place with rocks and tide pools. You'll see why I call it the Amphitheater, because it's kind of got this natural amphitheater-ish shape. Although the stage happens to be the ocean in this case. So, the tide is not all the way out, but pretty far out. So there's some good tide pools exposed. I have to be careful. These rocks sometimes can get really slippery. You always got to watch your step. But up here, closer to the high tide marks, you don't really get as much concentration of life. Here's a couple anemone. You can see sunburst anemone. But as the tide goes out and more gets exposed, the pools that are closer to the water have a kind of more interesting diversity of life. So it's all about just kind of walking around and keeping your eyes down. You'll probably see a couple of striped shore crabs scrambling around. This is one of my favorite anemones. It's just so gigantic and gnarly. I don't really, here, I'll put my hand there, give you a sense of scale. It's literally like 10 to 12 inches across. It's just huge and gorgeous. I named it Bertha. And there's this really big one down there. Some really sexy anemone. You've kind of got these three main pools that, when it's high tide, the waves are crashing into this one and that rock is generally underwater. Then you come down to this like second pool here, which I call the rock pool for obvious reasons. And sometimes when you come down here, if you're lucky, there's some pretty big Dungeness crabs or some cool rockfish that are good size, just kind of flitting about in there. And the tide's not all the way out, but when it is, this pool is generally pretty still too. So we can get a little farther down. You can see all the anemone are just everywhere. There's just so many of them. Now, when I look down here, I try to be really careful about where I step, because even though, if you look, I have professional grade non-slip kitchen shoes on, this stuff is slipperier than any kitchen floor you will ever encounter. I learned this from experience and wound up flat on my ass more than once. So as I said, you just kind of walk around and look down. There's just beautiful tide pools everywhere. The mussels can kind of handle getting walked on a little bit, and there's so many of them, and there's so much food source for all the other creatures that a couple of them get taken out. It's not terrible, but they can also withstand you just kind of really gently treading on them. I call this little spot Starfish Castle. As you can see, it's right at the edge where the breakers come in. But there's usually starfish down here, although I'm not seeing any right now. These are some beautiful anemone. So yeah, this is a great meditative activity for me during all this shutdown. Is just to come down here and look for cool sea creatures. Oh, I see a starfish. It's kind of under the breakers. Oh, there's two of them there. Looks like they're about to get busy. All right. Go team. So, the tide being as mellow as it is, it's pretty safe to come down to this part, but normally it would be a little tricky to navigate. And sometimes literally life-threateningly dangerous. So you kind of have to keep your wits about you, but I can tell you, this is some of the coolest marine environment that I've ever come across. You can see all the colors, the anemone, and different types of kelps and sea plants. It's really a special place that has become very dear to me during my tenure here in Santa Cruz. See, and like I said, there's another good sea star. You just got to keep your eyes to the ground and you'll find these little pools, perfectly still water that are just little ecosystems. Each one is different. Each one has a different population of animals, and they're just amazing. And they're like these little tiny worlds, just perfectly clear window into these little undersea universes that are just so cool and fascinating to me. You can almost not even tell when it's underwater until you see a ripple come across. How clear and still and perfect these things are. It's really, really enjoyable to watch. Come observe. I want to try to find a sea urchin before I cut out here. Let's see. Well, there's a couple in this pool. There's a couple sea urchins, Pacific purple sea urchins. You can see them. And there's a bunch of beautiful anemone. And then here's the sunburst. You can see the difference. The sunburst has the kind of stripy thing and the different colors. And then these are the giant green anemone. Now this one in the center screen right now is probably about 7-8 inches across to give you a sense of scale. But here's all these cool little sea urchins. So, yeah, you could really just spend some more urchins in this one. I like to come down here when the tide is low and early in the morning, and that lines up. It's a couple times a month, usually, give or take, and get the good lighting and just to observe all this beautiful sea life and try to tread lightly. You know, I step on the mussels and the barnacles, and that's about it. So I hope everybody enjoys my little micro tour of the Santa Cruz tide pools. I'm gonna come over to my favorite part of my journeys down to this area. I have to be careful. If you see this shiny rocks with the kind of black algae looking stuff on it, that is a trip to the hospital. So, that being said, there's one more thing I want to show you about after I get exhausted with exploring wonderful tide pools. This little spot called the Captain's Chair. I call it the Captain's Chair. It is literally shaped by the sea for millions or thousands, however long, to be shaped perfectly like a human ass. So, I'm going to have a seat, enjoy the view, rest a little from that climbing. We've got cormorants and pelicans flying around everywhere. A lot of boats on the water. I've got my trusty pen here. I'm gonna have a little pull, and I hope you guys have a wonderful morning and even more spectacular day, and I hope to get some more of these videos made for y'all before I leave this wonderful place. Okay.